Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about The Outer Worlds, and for those of you who are not familiar with this game, it was developed by a company and these guys spun off of the Bethesda department. You may know them from their previous work Fallout New Vegas, and it is nearly impossible not to make comparisons between the two games because they are very identical in a lot of ways. If you've never played a Bethesda RPG before, it takes a lot of inspiration from Dungeons and Dragons, where combat is really only part of the solution most of the times. Given your skill points are high enough, you can do a lot of different things, like you can try and talk your way out of a situation, you can lockpick doors, you can sneak, you can hack into computers, and it's really interesting because you just have to build your character the way that you want him to be, and when you level up, you put these skill points in certain attributes that you want. If you want to just go into an area, guns blazing, just kill everything without a second thought, you totally can do that. But if you want to play more of a pacifist type of gameplay, then you can up your persuasion skills, and perhaps you can persuade your adversary to cooperate with you. Obviously, it's not as limitless as Dungeons and Dragons is, because you are talking to a real person and he adjusts the story depending on what your reaction is. So this is a video game. It doesn't have that much in terms of freedom, but it certainly has a lot more than a normal video game would. The plot is that you are a character who was put into suspension on this spaceship known as Hope, and you are going to this galaxy known as Halcyon, and it is a galaxy totally owned by these corporations. There's like no government, it is all corporations. There's the president is basically like the chairman of the board. There's certainly a very cynical look at the whole corporate world that we live in, almost taken to the extreme. I don't think I would have that much of a pessimist view on how our corporate America works, but they certainly do bring up some interesting points, and it just has that kind of tone, that very tongue-in-cheek, like, man, isn't it weird that our bosses want us to work ourselves to death and we are seen more as assets to them? And, you know, if I am being completely honest, there is a certain level of truth to that. This is just taking it to the next extreme. So you are waken up by this mad scientist-esque character while you put into suspension, because it takes like 10 years from Earth to get to this galaxy Halcyon. So you are put in a frozen suspension. But the scientist, he was only able to wake you up, and his goal is to have you help him wake up all these other people who are basically like the brightest minds on Earth to help fix the dire situation that is happening in Halcyon. Because to put it plainly, this whole corporate situation isn't working out and people are dying, and there needs to be a change. So we need to put the best and the brightest to work in order to solve the crisis here on Halcyon. The unfortunate thing is they're all put into suspension, this hyper sleep situation. So we need to figure out a way to wake them all up. Now it develops from there, and I'm not too sure how funneled you are into a certain plot structure. Near the beginning of the game, you had the option to completely turn this mad scientist in, because he is a wanted fugitive by the chairman of the board. He is known as like a dangerous criminal, and so I totally had the option to go that way, down that pathway, and I'm not sure how it would evolve from there, but I chose to help him out because I agreed with his point of view. But that's just a sample of what's going on in this game, where you have totally different viewpoints and you can play things out however you wish. A lot of the times it would have you go to a planet and there are two different factions, and most of the time you will have to side with one faction over the other. So there are some difficult choices to be made, and there's never like a perfect situation. Sometimes I felt like if everything played out just the way that I wanted it to, I could have met some kind of compromise that would make everyone happy, but that's only if the stars aligned. And a couple of the times I did make mistakes that I later came to regret, like where I screwed over a certain faction that I actually did want to help out, but in order to achieve the goals that I wanted, I kind of had to mess them up. Like, there's just no easy decisions here, and you will definitely be sitting on that dialogue tree choosing how to respond to a character that is talking to you in order to get the situation to play out the best for everyone. And of course, you can just totally skip that and just kill everyone if you want. I'm just not sure totally how this game would play out if I went different pathways, how much variety there is here. But I think near the end, I was pretty happy with how this game turned out. It does that whole like, during the credits of a movie, it'll tell you like where the people are now that you just watched in the movie. So it'll tell you how your decisions played out. And I think I am okay with how the ending is. Obviously, no spoilers, but just know that what you choose, what decisions you make, matter in a game like this. So you might want to take a little time to think about your actions before they actually play out. You can have up to 2 companions with you at all times. I actually felt like I missed out on half of the companions that I could have, because during the companion, like whenever you depart onto a planet, it'll tell you, okay, take up to 2 of these companions to go with you, and there will be 6 slots, but 3 of them were always empty. I only discovered up to 3 different companions, 2 girls, and then there was like this cleaning robot who cleans stuff with acid, basically, so he was always pretty funny to take along with you. So I can only imagine if I took the other side, where if I turned in this mad scientist, that's where I would uncover these other companions to come with me, or I just missed a ton of content. But I really don't feel like I did, because I had done all of the side quests that were made known to me and all of the main quests, so it's just kind of weird. I feel like I missed a lot of content in this game, but maybe it's because it's only if I went down certain pathways, which is pretty interesting, and it definitely warrants multiple playthroughs if you are curious to experience all that this game has to offer. These teammates also have their own storylines, and you can talk with them and really get a bond with your companions if you want. They all have their own different backgrounds, and it was kind of fun bonding with these characters. Obviously, the Sam unit, this cleaning robot, didn't have much of a backstory at all. He was just more there for giggles. So most of the time I would take the 2 other humans, and it was just interesting getting to know them and seeing what they're all about. The combat is a first-person shooter, but you are also welcome to use melee weapons if you choose to spec your skill points that way. I just chose to go into ranged weapons most of the time. If you're familiar with Fallout games, they had this system called VATS, where you could basically target which limb you want to focus on. It just completely freezes time while you choose that and you use the acclimated points. In this game, it totally skips that and it just goes into slow motion, which the slow motion itself was very beneficial to me because I had a difficult time aiming in this game. I felt like this didn't have any aim assist at all, which, you know, I wouldn't have complained about a little bit of aim assist. I think to some level there was a little bit of aim assist. To a degree, I did notice a little bit of locking on, but not much, and I don't know, maybe I'm just bad at first-person shooters, but I had to lower the sensitivity like all the way when I was aiming, just to get, you know, kind of get my bearings and be able to aim somewhat. But I definitely was utilizing that slow motion. You also have like this jump out of the way, dodge, roll-esque type of thing, and then you have your traditional healing potion inhaler type thing that you can pick up as you explore the world. You can tell your companions to do special abilities. These are on pretty short cooldowns depending on how you spec your character. They do help quite a lot if you are having trouble. Typically, you know, actually I didn't really have too much trouble combat-wise in this game. Maybe near the end of the game, but I did do like all the quests that were made known to me, so I did feel like I was on par level-wise. Maybe I could have spec'd my character so he was a little more equipped for combat itself, because I tried to be the smooth, smart talker who was very knowledgeable about like hacking into computers, and I was very personable, but maybe I wasn't the best at combat itself, because I found the actual dialogue options a lot more intriguing than the combat. There's a ton of character customization in this game. You can totally customize your character however you want them to look. Your character doesn't talk like in Immortals Fenyx Rising, so he doesn't have that much of a personality as they did in Immortals Fenyx Rising, but you do have your dialogue options. Like every time a character says something to you, you have like 4 or 5 different options on how to reply to that character. character. There's weapons, there's gear, you can customize your weapons and gears with modifications, you can level them up, you have to repair them if they break down, you have to equip your companions with gear for themselves. There's just a lot of customization to make your character and your whole party feel like your own. Resources aren't that hard to come by, especially if you are a chronic looter like myself. I don't know what it is, but every time I walk into a room, and assuming it's not stealing, because you do get docked if you are seen stealing, I will just loot every single thing that is highlighted that I possibly can. That's why I made sure to make sure that my lock picking abilities were really high, because I would be able to open up any locked crates that I could, any locked doors. I just wanted it all. So resources weren't hard at all to come by. I know it kind of seemed a little troubling when I knew I had to repair my own gear by myself, but you have plenty of resources to be able to do that. I had a ton of money that I could bribe people should I need to progress in the story. If I just wanted to bribe the guards, I totally could do that. But I definitely had to spec my character in order to have a ton of carrying capacity, because you do have a weight limit to how much you can carry at one time. It does that whole Dungeons and Dragons-esque thing where if you are hit with a certain number of status effects, it can affect your character in negative ways, where if you are hit by a lot of, let's say, radiation, it'll say like, oh, due to all this radiation, your armor rating goes down by 10%, but you do have the option to accept that status for an additional perk point, which was pretty interesting. I've never seen a game do this before. Most of the time I would opt out of accepting that negative effect in order for a perk point, because the perk points themselves didn't seem that beneficial. Granted, there were a couple of cool things that you could do, like every time you kill a guy, you regenerate 15% of your health, or like your armor rating is a lot higher. So there are certain perks, but they just didn't seem ever that exciting to me necessarily. I just would rather get those by leveling up. One of the frustrating things, I talked about these different factions that you're trying to gain their favor. Sometimes your reputation would decrease even if there weren't any survivors necessarily to report your misgivings. So let's say I'm in a enemy territory, but I am disguised, and I end up accidentally blowing my cover and killing everybody in the room, which, sometimes that happens. Sometimes you end up just killing everybody in the room. My reputation for that faction would still decrease despite nobody knowing that it was me, or even if I was caught stealing from someone, and I killed the guy that saw me stealing, my reputation would still be decreased. I mentioned earlier I did all the side quests and everything that I possibly could find, but I feel like I definitely missed out on quite a lot of side quests, and that's why I think this game would have benefited from the exclamation mark over people who have quests for you to accept, because it did not have that. So I either needed to go around and talk to every single NPC in the town that I possibly could. Sometimes they would come up to you and ask you to help them out, but other times I felt like I had to go up to the person and talk to them like, hey, what's going on? Can I do anything to help? So I feel like I missed out on some of the content itself, and I don't think like an indicator over an NPC would have been too game breaking. I would have still felt immersed in the world. But it was a shorter game, at least all the content that I played through, and I've heard this complaint before that it is a shorter game and it's not worth $60. And while I do agree, I probably wouldn't have paid full price for this game. I had a great time playing through what I did. I just felt like the developers, it is a smaller team because Obsidiary did break off Bethesda, so it didn't have the full manpower that they did in Fallout New Vegas. So I understand why it was a shorter game, but it just kind of felt like they ran out of time and they had to wrap the story up quickly and abruptly. I would have liked maybe at least another 4 or 5 hours to play through, but I guess that's just a compliment to the gameplay itself, meaning that I wanted more content to play through, because if it was a bad game, I would have been happy that it ended up abruptly, right? I think by now can we just kind of accept that games run really bad on the Nintendo Switch, especially modern games that are also being played on PlayStation and Xbox. Xbox. I just feel like every time I talk about a modern game nowadays, I'm just complaining about its performance on the Nintendo Switch, and that's why I felt like it could really have benefited from a hardware upgrade, but it looks like we're not going to get that anytime soon. This game, I guess when it first launched, it was notoriously bad, like everyone complained about it, but when I did pop this game into my Switch, there was a very meaty patch to do, so you can tell that they put a lot of support trying to update this game in order to run optimized pretty well on the Nintendo Switch. And I do feel like, for the most part, this game ran okay. Granted, the loading screens themselves were very, very long, which can be frustrating. I ended up looking at a lot of Reddit while I played this game during the loading screens. The loading screens themselves do provide some pretty cool artwork, however, and sometimes they're like these cool drawing of the anatomy of the wildlife in this outer space, which was pretty interesting to look at, but the loading screens themselves just were pretty bad. And this game performed not great on the Switch, not as bad as some of the other horror stories that I've heard when this game first launched on the Switch, but it definitely has that like Vaseline look where everything looks blurry, especially out in the distance. Objects would pop in. Occasionally I would get some hiccups, some stutters, but the gameplay itself, as far as frame rate goes, it is definitely playable. I still had a fun time playing through this game despite it running on the Nintendo Switch, and that's just one of the sacrifices I think I have to make in order to play this game on handheld on the Switch. But if you have other options, and if you prefer to play at home anyway, I think I would recommend looking elsewhere to play this game. It's just not as bad as some of the other stories that you have heard before. Like, it is playable for sure, and it's just a fun game. Immediately I got sucked into the gameplay itself. I like this whole formula. I really enjoyed Fallout New Vegas. I think that game is still better than this game, The Outer Worlds, but to some degree it scratched that RPG itch that I was feeling from old Bethesda games. It's been a while since I played a game like this, and I enjoyed my time despite the problems that I had on the Nintendo Switch. I think I will give this game a 4 out of 5. But if you are playing it elsewhere and you're just looking for more of a shorter RPG experience with that Bethesda flair, I think I would heartily recommend you play this game. Well guys, that's it for me. Let me know what you have to think about The Outer Worlds, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'll talk to you later. Bye!